Samach bet today, and we start with a little bit of a non sequitur. Even though the first words of today's daf on the second line are hachi, implying if what we just said is true, we have a question. Because what we are about to say really does not follow exactly from what we said before. The Gra on the bottom of my Gemara says that Rashi and Tosfot and himself take out those words. So takes out the words hachi, because this is not contingent on what we just said, but it is related. And the way it's related is that yesterday we started a discussion about whether a non-Jew, the Mishnah said, cannot become a Nazir, right? And we said it's because it says it says Bnei Yisrael, Daber Bnei Yisrael by Nazir. The thing is that there were two other examples that we discussed yesterday where it says Bnei Yisrael, and then we add non-Jews, right? Because it says the word ish. And one example, one yesterday was Erechin, which is a sort of a kind of neder, right? It's a very prescribed neder where you, like Nazir essentially, where you say, I'm going to give a certain value, a fixed value to the Beit HaMikdash, and it's depending on the person's gender and age, that's a set value from the Torah. And so you're basically making a commitment. It's very similar to a neder. So by Erechin, we discussed yesterday, it says Daber el Bnei Yisrael, and then it says Ish. So Bnei Yisrael seems to exclude non-Jews. The word Ish is a kolel humanistic word that includes everyone. And so by Erechin, we said yesterday that you can split it, that a non-Jew can be the object, can be the person you say the erech of, but not the one giving the Erechin. And we couldn't quite find an equivalent by Nazir where you could be partial on and partial off. But the third case was neder. And we discussed yesterday neder as well, where it says ish by neder. And by neder, the same thing would be true, presumably, that it says Daber el Bnei Yisrael, and then it says ish. So they are all compared to each other. And so today we're going to try to sort of understand the parameters of involving a Jew and a non-Jew in these three categories: Nazir, neder, and Erechin, which again are all sort of subtypes of nidarim. Okay? So it says them on the top. The second line from the top, hachi, which was just based on what we've discussed. It says ish ki afli neder be'erkecha, right? It says by Erechin. Why do we have to say the word? We're not exactly sure which word we're including here. Maybe the word ish, maybe yafli. But the question is, why do we have to say the word ish by Erechin, which tells you a man, which we included yesterday to be a non-Jew, right? Why do we need a pasuk to tell me that? Michti says one in the second line. Ha'it gish Erechin l'nidarim. We know that there's a comparison in general that the rules of Erechin are similar to the rules of Nidarim, to Amakra, because the verse says, Ish ki afli neder be'erkecha. So it says if you make a neder of Erech, so implying that Erechin is a type of neder. So in default, there's a hekesh that we compare the rules of Erechin to the rules of Nidarim. Vitanya gabe Nidarim, fifth line, it says by Nidarim, Ish, now this is a quote from a Braita, it says the word Ish by neder. Ma tamulomer ish. Why does it say the word Ish a second time? The Rabot Ovdei Kochavim. That tells you that by Nidarim, we include non-Jews, Shehem Nodrim Nidarim and Nidavot Ki Yisrael. So they can make a neder, just like a Ben Yisrael, and they would have the same responsibilities, and court would enforce it again if court could do that. So that if a non-Jew got up and said, I make a neder that I'm going to support the shul and give him $1,000, they can go and collect that neder, right? Just like they could by Yisrael. So if you know it by Nidarim, and you compare Nidarim to Erechin, continues the Gemara, Ish ki afli be'erechin lamali. Why do you have to say the word Ish to tell you to include a non-Jew by Erechin? We should know it from the fact that you already included a non-Jew from Nidarim. Ella says, well, you're right. You don't need the pasuk for Ish for that, even though we said you did yesterday. You need the pasuk Ish to tell you something else. Hi Ish mi baile la'atuye, to include mufla samuch le'ish, to include that not only is an adult, and by adult we mean, a 12-year-old woman and a 13-year-old man, but not only is an adult chayav and responsible for nidarim, but even a mufla samuch le'ish, which literally means a person with intelligence. Mufla means right, a person who can think straight, who's close to being an adult. And we learned elsewhere, in Ida specifically, that refers to a person a year up to their bar or bat mitzvah, right? An 11-year-old girl or a 12-year-old boy fit into this category of mufla samuch le'ish. And the pasuk says the word ish an extra time to include people who are not technically an ish, but are close. And so that's what the word is extra for, to tell you that those people can make nidarim, that muflesh samach leish can also make a neder. Well, that's a very good proof, a very good use if you hold that that's true. Hanichalamanda Amar in Nida, which is where we had this Gemara, that muflesh samach leish is doraita. That there's a biblical source to add a person who's a child, but almost an adult for the chiyuv of nidarim. El Namanda Amar, that's drabanan, right? If you hold that is only a drabanan, that we add a kid, so then obviously the pasuk's not telling you a drabanan. So we're back to our original question. Ish kiyafli lamali. So what do we do with the pasuk of ish kiyafli? What is that there to tell you? You don't need to tell you a non-Jew, because we learned that from comparing Erechin to Nidarim. It can't be telling you a child, because we already, because it's only Drabanan. Ella, what is it telling you? La tuye mufles samach leish de oved kochavim. Fascinating. It's telling you that although this is the opinion that a Jewish boy who's 12 is not able to make a neder midoraita, a non-Jewish boy who's 12 is, which makes no sense, of course, right, to me. But the question is why, how could it be that it would be more chamor by a non-Jew than a Jew, right? So, I mean, there's ways you could sort of make it work, but the Gemara is going to ask questions on it right away. So I don't think we need to go too deep into adding this. It doesn't matter. Why is that a problem right away? Because if you recall yesterday, we said that what can a non-Jew do with Erechin? They can't be the person making the Erech, they can be the object of the Erech. So if you're the object of the Erechin, your age has no impact, right? Meaning a 2-year-old can be the object of Erechin. So it's good. If you're one making it, it matters. Are you old enough to make it? Do you have dat? You don't. But according to what we said yesterday, a non-Jew cannot make it ever. Now, it turns out that was simplistic when we said it yesterday. In fact, it's a machloket tanaim. There's one Tana who says that a non-Jew can be the one being ma'arich and can't be the object, can't be the ne'arach, in which case it would make a lot of sense. Because we're saying a non-Jew adult can do erechin, and we're saying even a non-Jew who's 12 or a girl who's 11, non-Jewish girl who's 11. But if you're saying that a non-Jew can be the object, but not be the person making the erechin, then there's no reason to include a child. It's not even relevant. So let's read that inside. This would make sense that you need this pasuk to include a 12-year-old or 11-year-old girl if you held, where am I? Amar B'nai Yisrael ne'erachim. That B'nai Yisrael can be the object, the one who, I keep saying object, but the one who the erech is made about. Non-Jews cannot be. And then when we did include a non-Jew, says the Braita, you might think they can't give the value. Talmud Omer Ish. So Ish is there to include a non-Jew giving the value. And we're saying not only can a non-Jew make a promise to give Erechin, but a non-Jew is a minor who's a mufla samach leish, a boy who's 12 or a girl who's 11 or older can do that. Elamanda Amar, but according to the one who we quoted yesterday, who said, B'nai Yisrael marichin, that a Ben Yisrael can give over the value of Erechin, can make a commitment, but a non-Jew cannot do that. And if they do it, it has no impact. So if a non-Jew says, I want to give the Erech of Jack, it means nothing. So if that's true, and continues the Braita, you might think that a non-Jewish value isn't there. Talmud Omer Ish, they're telling you that a non-Jew can be the one whose value is given. But then what are you adding by saying a mufla samach lish? I feel tinok ben chodesh bariruchio. Even a 1-month-old baby has value. So there's no 12-year-old. It's any kid. So ki yafli lamali. So then according to that Tana, why do we need ki yafli again? By Erechin, again, we don't need it to include a non-Jew because a non-Jew is derived from Nidarim, which is hekesh from Erechin to Nidarim. We don't need it to tell you a non-Jewish child because a non-Jewish child can't make Erechin because a non-Jewish adult can't make Erechin. They can only be the subject of the Erechin. So what do you need the word kiyafli for, or ish is more specifically, that we keep saying kiyafli, but the pasuk continues, right? Ish kiyafli. So we keep saying kiyafli, but we mean ish. Amar of Adam Ra'ava, in fact, we don't necessarily mean that. What we mean to say is la'atuye ovei kochavim gadol. It's to include, now Rashi understands, the Mefarish understands here, that again, include here sort of means exclude. It means to include in the rule of ish kiyafli, which literally means a man or a person who's Yafli means who's knowledgeable, who's able to distinguish. And what it's telling you is that by a non-Jew, unlike a Jew we said in Nida that a Jewish person who turns 13, who is a gadol, right? They have simanim, they can make a neder even if they don't really understand what they're talking about. So if you're 12 and you understand what you're talking about, you can make a neder. If you're 13, it doesn't even matter if your dot is there or not, you can make the neder. But a non-Jew, it's not true. They can only make a neder if they understand what they're saying, even if they're above the age of maturity. So even an 18-year-old non-Jew, if they don't understand, they don't have the intelligence or the discrimination, then their neder has no impact. They're not considered to be someone who can make a neder. And this goes beyond obviously a shota, which is a topic of someone who really is not capable of any intelligence, couldn't do anything, right? We don't consider them to have agency. This is talking about someone who doesn't fit that category. They're not a shota, but they just don't have the discriminatory ability, right? They don't understand. They don't have the maturity to understand what they're saying and what the implications of what they're saying is. So they were saying, if they don't know how to make a distinction between two things, and so they don't know what the consequences of their statement is, then they cannot make a neder. So, or they can't make erechim either, right? So that we're adding that by a non-Jew, you have an extra ish kiyafli to tell you that you actually need to understand what you're saying, even if you're an adult, unlike a Yisrael. So that is what we need the word ish kiyafli by erechim for. Ask the Gemara, what about the third one? Not the word ish, but ella kiyafli dekatav rachmana gabi nizirut lamali. Why do we need kiyafli by nizirut? Right? Why do we have to say that a nazir has to be clear? We are ready, itkish nizirut nidarim. We compared nizirut to nidarim, same way we compared erechim to nidarim, and so kiyafli lamali. Says the Gemara, well, it's la'atuye, it's to add yadayim she'ein mochichot. Again, I'm going to read this the way most Rishonim do, not Tosfot though, but that in fact it doesn't mean that at all. That what it means is to add, meaning by subtracting. Yadayim she'ein mochichot. Remember, yadayim are where you say me too, right? Person says I'm going to be a nazir, and someone else says I also will be a nazir, right? So you're saying you're not saying I want. You say I also. You didn't say I also will be a nazir. You say me too, right? And so that's a yad because you're basically extending the hand, the nizirut, and you're accepting on yourself. We said in the beginning of the Masechet of this one and Nidarim that yadot nidarim ki nidarim, yadot nizirot ki nizirot, right? That was the first Mishnah in the Masechet. And so that's a yad that's mochiach. But what if it's a yad that's not so clear? Meaning a person says, I want to be a nazir and I want to go to shul tomorrow morning. And someone says next to them, it says, me too. So it's not so clear. Did you mean about the second thing, about the first thing? Should we say misafek, you have to do both? Says the Gemara earlier, now we're saying now, no, you don't have to do any of them, because, or at least by the nazir, you don't have to do. Because yadayim she'ina mochichot, a yad that's not clear, what it means doesn't count at all. It's not a suffix, and you have to do both. It has to be clear when you say it. And where do we know that from? The pasuk, it says kiyafli, because it says you have to be clear when you speak about what you're saying. If you're not clear, it's not like it's a suffix. Just be clear. You don't have to do it on chance. If when you said it, it wasn't clear, you don't have to fulfill it, because it only is things that are clear. And so it's la'atuye, it's to add on that you also need to be clear by yadayim she'ena mochichot, and therefore they are not yadayim, they don't count. And because of the way I just explained it, I have to change the whole next lines of the Gemara, which those who explain like me do. The Itmars, we have a famous machloket, which we've had many times before. Yadayim she'ena mochichot. If you say me too, but it's not so clear what you're referring to. Abaya Amar Havi Yadayim. Abaya says they count. Rava Amar Lo Havi Yadayim. Rava says they don't count. So now I just explained to you that the pasuk is needed to support Rava, right? Rava says they don't count, and that's from this extra pasuk of ish kiyafli lindornet to make a nazirut. Sorry, right? So kiyafli to make a nazirut, then that's only true if it's very clear. If it's not clear, it doesn't count. So therefore, you have to change the next words in the Gemara. The Gemara says labaya nicha. The way I explained it is l'rava nicha al labaya ma'ikil meimar, right? And Tosfos actually has a pshat where he goes through the Girsa and our Gemara, where in fact we're adding yadayim she'ena mochichot to say that they're included in the chiyuv of nizirut, which doesn't make as much sense because the word hafla'ah implies you have to be clear, not that you have to be unclear. But the Gemara does seem to imply that way. Anyways, according to the one who's excluded, which I think is Abaya, in the way I read the Gemara, what ma'ikil meimar, According to that, Amora el kiyafli mibai Rabbi Tarfon. In fact, the reason we say the word kiyafli by Nizirut is to tell you the ruling of Rabbi Tarfon. The Tanya, we had this earlier, it was a very fun case earlier. It was fun, I think, where you had a bunch of people standing on the road and you saw a man walking down the street. You didn't know who it was, right? And person one said, I'm confident that's Jerry, and I'm a Nazir that that's Jerry. And the next one says, I'm sure it's not Jerry. I'm a Nazir that it's not Jerry. And the third one says, remember, I'm a Nazir if you're both Nazirs. And the fourth one says, I'm a Nazir if neither of you. And we had 6 people. And so the Mishnah said, there was a machloket, but it was a question whether it's a suffix or Rabbi Tarfon's opinion was, none of them are Nazirim. And right, you never find out who the person was, right? But none of them are Nazirim. Why? Rabbi Amar Datanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Tarfon, Ein Echad Mehem Nazir, because the Fishalo Nitna Nizirut Ela Hafla. Nizirut has to be clear, not just when you say it, which is what a yad is, right? Where I said me too, but it wasn't clear what I meant. But it has to be clear about the facts, right? The fact is the person Jerry or not? We don't know, and we never will know because the person turned around and walked away, remember, right? And even if they didn't turn around and walked away, at the time that we were speaking, we couldn't have known. We were taking guesses based on our best judgment of a person 500 feet away. But by definition, that's not clear, right? So it was a guess. And Nazirut never can apply when you're just guessing, essentially, because you need to have clarity, right? And so since by definition you couldn't have clarity, I thought it was Jerry, but I couldn't, it's so far away that there couldn't be certainty. And so if there can't be certainty, it can't be Nazirut. So Hanichal Rabbi Tarfon. So that makes sense that according to Rabbi Tarfon, that's why you need the extra pasuk to tell you that if you don't know if it's Jerry, it's not Nazirut. El Rabbanan Ma'ikal Meimar. So according to Rabbanan, why do you need extra pasuk? They hold that if it turns out that it is that person, you are a Nazir. So why do you need an extra pasuk? El Nimbaile, we need it for the following Mishnah. In fact, it should say Kiditznan, which is a Mishnah in Chagiga. Mishnah says, Heter Nidarim, the whole concept that we've had in last Masechta of Heter Nidarim, Hatarat Nidarim, right? That if you make a neder and you regret it, you can go to Chacham and you can speak over the conditions and get out of it. That, says the Mishnah in Chagiga, that's really a pretty innovative thing. It's called Parchim Ba'avir. It's flying in the air, meaning it has no roots. There's nothing connecting that to reality. It was sort of to the Torah, right? It was sort of, I wouldn't say made up, but it was very creative. That's what the Mishnah says. There's nothing to rely on. It's a tradition, but there's really no good basis for this tradition. Not that it's wrong, I'm saying that it's just something that was done without a real documented basis. Rebbe Eliezer says, no, yesh lahem al mashi yismechu. In fact, there is a basis for the concept of heter nedarim, shenemar, because the Torah says, ish kiyafli, and then it repeats by Nazir kiyafli, and so it's shtei ba'amim. Why does it have to say it should be clear 2 times? To tell you that when you answer something on yourself, it has to be clear. You have to be clear, I'm going to be a Nazir, or I'm not going to eat from the cow. One second. Echad hafla'ah l'isur, ve'echad hafla'ah leheter. That there is clarity in terms of asering, which is what a neder and a nazir is, but there's also clarity in terms of permitting it. There's a concept where if you clarify what your intention really was, and you go to a chacham and say, I would have never made my neder if I realized the implications of not eating meat for 3 years and what it would do to my relationships, et cetera, then you could be a heter of your nizirut, or your neder and nizirut, but also neder, and that's sort of relied on the pasuk. It's not the explicit meaning of the pasuk, but it's an extra drasha of the word hafla'ah to tell you that.
Okay.
If this is the implications, you can't make things that like we see things all the time. Like I can't think of examples, but like.
Well, so there's a difference between if you're angry, right? So that's what heter nedarim comes from, right? Very often people say, I didn't realize at the time that I was in anger and I didn't realize the implications. If you realize the implications, but you were angry, meaning if you knew that by saying, I'm not going to talk to that person who was going to ruin your business deal, but you said at the time, I'm so angry at him that I don't care. You can't then, when you calm down the next day, say, I'm sorry I said that, right? But if there's something you didn't realize, remember we talked earlier about a peta, something that's new that you didn't realize the implications, then that's the way you can find the heter. anyways, it is complicated, but the goal is you shouldn't make any nidar. That was what I would advise. Okay, turn the page to Daf Samach Bet
So
Amud
we're
Bet.
concluding that non-Jews can make a neder?
So the Gemara is saying that non-Jews can make a neder and it has impact completely. It's very interesting. I didn't talk about this, but one of the questions is, can they say the lo taseh? Remember that we kept quoting of lo yachel divaro, bal yachel doesn't apply to non-Jew. Obviously, those mitzvot don't apply to them, right? So their neder is not the same neder as a Yisrael because there isn't a lo taseh involved in going against it, but a court would essentially uphold it.
I don't understand that. I don't see how a Jewish court has jurisdiction over non-Jews. If I mean, I thought that it's only Jews that are bound by, halacha.
Look, practically speaking, I don't know if there ever was a time.
I mean, I don't, even theoretically speaking, forget practically.
But halachically, the Jewish courts in the Jewish sovereign land have authority over non-Jews. The rules are different though for non-Jews, right? A Jew, the court would make them keep Shabbos. They're not going to make a non-Jew keep Shabbos.
I'm talking about Nadarim or something like this.
Well,
Yeah. All right. So a mitzvot lo taseh, that would never apply to a non-Jew.
Except for the Shiva mitzvah b'nei Noach, maybe.
Okay, right.
Right. So that's true.
Mitzvot aseh.
Mitzvot aseh would not apply, and a lo taseh would not apply either. So non-Jew who was over neder wouldn't bring a carbon, for example, right?
You couldn't compel the person to keep their neder?
No, you could. That's what I'm saying. You can't. There's certain aspects of it that apply and certain that don't apply. A Jew has a lo taseh to keep their neder and not to go against it. They would bring a carbon. A non-Jew doesn't bring a carbon. Remember, they don't bring any lo taseh carbons.
Right.
But court would compel them to keep it if they had the ability to do that.
So if they made a neder to
give a gift to the synagogue.
They give a gift.
Yeah. So that's how we're passing that a neder, not passing it. So the Gemara is concluding. A neder would apply to a non-Jew. They can make a neder. Erechin applies to a non-Jew, but there's a machloket whether they can only do part of it. They either can be the subject or they can be the one making. They can be marich and not nerach, or the opposite. They can be nerach but not marich. And by nizirut, we said that none of it applies essentially to a non-Jew. Okay.
Is this the only case where non-Jews are like
discussed?
Other than the Sheva, but are bound by halacha? Forget Sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach, but this is not Sheva mitzvot b'nei. This is a
right. These are presumably not Sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach. There's a little debate about that, but yeah. So I think outside of this, I'm not sure. These psukim are specifically there to add them. Right? Saying the word ish is there to add a non-Jew.
But the Torah must use the word ish. I'm sorry to harp on this, but
it's true. The Torah does use the
word ish other times.
The Torah many times does use the word ish, and we don't usually include a non-Jew. It's true. I don't know. I can't recall off the top of my head whether there are other examples, but it's definitely rare, right? We don't talk about nida by a non-Jew. We don't. We do talk about tuma, but not the halachot.
Right, or it says ish or isha or something like.
Right.
I don't know. Weird.
Okay, let's continue the Mishnah. Chomer. Now, our first Mishnah said that Nizirut applies to both avadim, nashim and avadim, right? Not to a non-Jew, but to slaves and to women. But there was Chomer by an Eved because a master can force their Eved, but they can't force their wife, right? Says the Mishnah now, Chomer ba'avadim ibn nashim, but in some ways, an Eved is more Chomer than a woman about a Nizirut. Shehu meifar nidrei ishto. A husband can be meifar the Nizirut of his wife and Nidarim, but we're talking about Nizirut here, right? A woman says, I want to be a Nizirah. The husband can say, I cancel it. But ein meifar nidrei avdo. An owner can be meifar the Nidarim of his Eved. Now, an Eved can't override his master. So what does that mean? Says the Mishnah, hefer ishto. Right? If a woman says, I want to be a Nizirah, and the husband says, I cancel it, then it's canceled. Hefer lamit. There's no, even if he dies the next day or he divorces her, her Nizirut is done. It's over. She could do it again, but this Nizirut is over. But hefer la'avdo. But if an owner says, Evan says, I want to be a Nazir, and the owner comes and says, I don't want you to be a Nazir, I'm being made for your Nizirut. So the Rambam reads the next words literally. The next words say, Yatzah l'cherut, that the guy becomes free. So the Rambam understands that means, to some extent, that the owner, an Eved has no ability to be a Nazir. And by the owner taking him seriously and responding to him, he's essentially giving him agency and essentially saying, I treat you as a person and I free you. Which seems like quite a stretch, right? That just by the fact that he took him seriously and he was made for his neder, it's a saying, I listen to you, I give you agency, and he automatically goes free just by saying that. And therefore, since he goes free, he's got to mishlim Nazirut. He's got to fulfill his Nazirut because he made it and now it has to apply. Tosfot and Rashi here.
Is like there's owner force them to mess up on it. Does he take the korban?
No, because there's no Nazirut. Because he can't. There's no there's really the owner not only can force him, but no, so if the owner is Mayfair, then what the owner is basically showing is that he doesn't treat him as a slave because he's taking his word seriously and he frees him, and therefore it counts. Now that's a very unusual position. Tosas here deals with this problem by adding one letter, which is Heifer la'avdo v'yatza l'cherut, right? And he subsequently goes free because he bought his freedom or he was released by the master. Then mashlim niziruto, he's got to finish his nizirut because essentially it's in abeyance as long as he's a slave. Once he's no longer a slave, the nizirut is chal. Unlike a woman who the husband can cancel the nizirut, and it's not when the husband dies, it's not like it comes back. It was totally canceled.
The husband can only cancel the nizirut if he heard her making the vow.
Correct.
So he can't do it later on.
No, he can do it. Remember, he does it the day he hears about it. B'yom shamo.
Yom Shimo, right? Or like at the time that he finds
Correct.
out about it.
Correct.
But he can't do it later on after she started and all of a sudden he
Good.
just,
No, if he hears about it after she started, then he can do it whenever he hears about it.
at any point of time.
At any point of time.
Okay, I forgot about that.
We
Okay.
had a whole, that's B'yom Shamo. Remember, we had a whole discussion. What if she finishes, right? And she wants to go bring her carbon. The problem is that what if he gets rid of
Right.
it again, right? So it's very tricky because he could do it even after the fact. He can retroactively. So anyways, continues the Gemara, Tanur Abanan. We learned in the Braita, Lama Rabo Kofel Nizirut. I don't understand, says the Braita. Why can a master force his Eved not to keep his Nizirut? He can say, I don't care if you're a Nazir, drink the wine. But he cannot force his Eved not to keep his Nidarim and Erechin. Rashi points out, the Mefarish points out here, what do you mean Erechin? So the Eved says, I'm going to give $50 to Shul. Who's $50? So there must be a case, which we do discuss, where the Eved got money on condition that his master has no share in it, right? And Eved's allowed to have a side gig. And as long as the owner agrees and whatever, the money's given in a certain way, he can have his own funds. So if an Eved says, I'll pay $50 and he has $50, the owner can't cancel that. So why is Nazir different than Nidarim and Erechin? Maishna Gabi Nazir says the answer is, the reason is by Nazir, Amarachmana la'asar isur al nafsho, that you're prohibiting something on yourself. But obviously an Eved doesn't have a self because they can't control what they do, right? Misha nafsho kinuyolo, person who owns themselves. Yatsa Eved she'ein nafsho kinuyolo. An Eved doesn't own themselves. So the concept of Nazir doesn't apply by Eved, and the owner can say, I don't care that you want to be a Nazir, drink the wine. Says Gemara, well, so why don't you say the same thing by neder, right? The owner can say, I own you, I control you. I don't want you to stop drinking wine. You'll get sick, you'll get tired, it won't be any fun anymore, right? I don't want you to keep drinking wine. So if the Eved says, I don't want to eat pasta, the owner could say the same thing. I don't, which is a neder. You can make a neder. The owner can say, I want you to eat it. It's cheaper. It makes you energy, gives you strength. Says the Gemara, Amar Sheshet, you know what? Talking about a case where there's a cluster of grapes sitting on the table, and the Eved comes in, he says, not another grape. I make a neder that I'm not going to eat these grapes. Or he says, I'm going to be a Nazir, so I'm not going to touch these grapes. So that's a hugely different thing. Because Gabe, Nidarim, so what if he doesn't eat these grapes? Chimitzar Bahai, he's usher in these grapes, but lo mitzar b'achriti, he's not usher in other grapes. And if his owner really wants him to eat grapes, he can get him more grapes, right? So lo matzi kafile, you can't force him to eat these grapes. He made a neder, he doesn't want to eat them. The neder is chal, and if you really want to have grapes, so get him more grapes. But gabi nizirut, you can't say that. The chimitzar b'hai, itzar b'kulo, right? By a nizirut, if you say I'm not eating grapes, say I'm a nazir, not only can't you eat the grapes on the table, you can't eat any grapes in the world for 30 days or whatever. So therefore, matzi kafile. Therefore, you can force him. Says, well, that's ridiculous, right? Because what you're saying now is that there's no difference between Nazir and Neder. It just happens to be that by Neder, there's a way out, and by Nazir, there's no way out. Right? It's not a real difference, it's a technical difference. So what if the case was, Gabi Nidarim, what if the case was, Milo Askinan, what if you had a case, Leka Elahai Eshkol? You don't own any other grapes, right? There's only one bunch of grapes. So then you're saying the owner couldn't be Mefer his netter, not Mefer, could abrogate his netter, right? Which would mean there's no real difference. It's just a technicality, right? What if there's only one cluster of grapes? Dilo achale, sorry, dilo achale chalash, right? You got to eat these grapes. Everyone knows you feel much stronger after you eat grapes. You can learn Daf Yomi better. And the owner doesn't want his Evan not to eat the grapes because he wants him to get nourished and go work in the field. So why can't the owner force him to go against that netter? Says El Amar Rava, Kigon, you know what the case, sorry, El Amar Abai is the way the Bach changes it. Kigon sheyach chartzan munach lefanav. The cases where we're talking not about grapes, but about chartzanim. Chartzanim are, we had a machoket, but the seeds is how we generally said, right? Grape seeds. The Gabi Nidarim, so what? If he says, I don't want to eat the seeds, Bahayhu de mitzar. He's only usher on the seeds in front of you. Lamatzi kafilai. But Gabi Nazir to Itzer Nami Bachrini, by becoming a Nazir, you would prohibit not only all the seeds in the world, but all the grapes. So Matzi Kafile. So then the owner has much more implications. Says the same question. Gabi Nidarim, Miloskins, like Chartzan. Let's say all you've got in the house today is one kernel, right? Or one small amount for the Evet to eat. And he doesn't eat it. Hilo achale chalash. So if there's going to be an implication, then the owner should cancel that as well. You haven't explained any fundamental difference between a neder and a nazir. If an owner says, I need you to eat this because your work for me, then that should be good enough to get rid of the nazirut and the neder, right? So what's the difference? Elamar Abai says, you know what? Or again, if you switch it, this will be Rava. You got the whole thing wrong. We were making a mistake. A neder, an eved cannot make a neder, in fact. Right? Lama, well, we should read it the opposite way. Lama rabot tzarach lichvodo l'nizirut. Why does an owner have to force his eved to not fulfill his nizirut? Meaning, he has to say to him, I don't want you to fulfill it in order for it not to be chal. The ein tzarach lichvodo l'nidarim. But you don't have to force your eved not to fill his neder. It never started. Meaning, if an eved makes a neder, it has no impact. If an eved says, I want to be a nazir, it has impact until the owner says, I don't want you to be a nazir, right? So why by nazir does it count and the owner has to cancel it, but by neder and shavua, it never even counts. The chvoto means not that it's chal, but that it doesn't even start. My time, and that's because of the pasuk by shvua. The Amar Kra, a person who makes this past week's parsha, right? Lahara o lahetev. You make a shvua to do bad, or meaning to do something that harms you, or something that's good for you. You make a shvua that I'm gonna, I don't know, not take a shower for 30 days, which I guess is lahara. Or you make a shvua that I'm gonna eat, I'm gonna exercise every day, which is like Dave, let's say, right? You could do the opposite, but either way, mahatava reshut, just like doing things for yourself that are good is something that is voluntary. Af hara'a reshut, the thing that's negative has to also be voluntary. Yatsa lahara la'achirim she'eno reshut biyado. But you can't ever make a shvua or a neder saying, I make a neder that someone else won't take a shower for 30 days, right? You can't do it about that. And by an eved, because they don't own themselves, right? Every neder is essentially someone else's property, and every shvua. And so neder and shvua never are chal by a nazir. I'm not by an eved. A nazir could be chal, and the owner can say, I don't want you to be a nazir because it makes you less valuable. You can't work as hard. You can't drink with me, whatever. But the nizirut is actually something that would be chal unless the owner says, I don't want you to do it.
So just
Mishnah of today.
Hold on. Just to recap. So
Sorry.
an eved cannot make a neder, unlike
Eved, right. So according to this opinion, which we end with, an eved makes a neder has no implication. It doesn't have any force.
The owner doesn't have to.
The owner doesn't have to cancel it. The owner doesn't have to say anything. An eved cannot make a neder because it's essentially about somebody else, which is him, but he's somebody else's property. Okay.
It's ironic that a Jewish slave can't make a neder, but
This is an Eved Kanani, all of this.
oh, this is an Eved Kanani.
Oh, this is Eved Kanani, yeah.
Okay.
Continues the Mishnah, Eved Avar Mikenega Panav. Sorry, if an Eved runs away, right? He runs away from his owner. So an Eved gets up in the morning and says, I want to be a Nazir, and then he escapes. So it says the Mishnah, Rabbi Meir Omer Lo Yishteh. He runs away to the north. He should not drink wine because he's a Nazir. Even though we said an Eved can't become a Nazir, he ran away from his owner, and so he's free in some way. So he shouldn't drink wine. His Nazirut should be Chal. Rabbi Yossi says, Yishtab. What are you talking about? There's no Nazirut. He should drink until the police come and pick him up, right? Let him have a drink. Says the Gemara, what's the machlok? The Amar Shmuel says, Hamafkir Avdo, let's say a person, right? So we're assuming the case here is, we're adding that the case is, or the Eved ran away, and the owner made no effort to collect him, right? The owner basically said, it's not worth the trouble. It'll cost me this much money to go find him, whatever the case is, but I'm not going to make any effort. So essentially, he's mafkir the Eved. He's not happy about it, but he gives up. He doesn't think he's ever going to find his Eved again. Said Shmuel, if a person is mafkir their Eved, yatzad cherut, they go out to freedom. The ain sarach get shechur. You don't need to write them even to get shechur like you normally would for an Eved. It's the equivalent of freeing them. Meaning you don't say that he's ownerless and whoever finds him can become the new owner. The Eved goes free. Once the original owner said, I give up, I'm not going to find him, he becomes free man, a Jew, basically. So Rabbi Meir, it's like Shmuel. Rabbi Meir says like Shmuel, that since he ran away and the owner's not coming to find him, he's a free person. And so he's got to keep his Nazirut. And Rabbi Yossi, let like Shmuel. Rabbi Yossi says he's still a slave. He's just not in the right possession of his owner. So therefore he's not a Nazir, he can drink all the wine he wants. So maybe that's the machloket. That's not the machloket. Everybody agrees with Shmuel that in fact an Eved who ran away would be free. But here we're talking about an Eved where the owner didn't give up on him, right? So he's not a free man. The owner is going to try to find him. Elamanda Amar Yishten, so the Tana Rabbi Meir says that you can drink wine. I'm sorry, Rabbi Yossi says you can drink wine. Savar, he holds sof mahadar hadar va'ati the gabe, right? Eventually the owner is going to find him. And when he finds him, he wants this person to be as healthy as possible. So lishti chamra he should keep drinking wine. He doesn't get weak, right? You get very weak if you don't drink wine, especially in those days when the water was very bad quality, right? So they drank wine was their main drink. So it's the owner's interest that his Eved should drink wine because he wants him to be in good shape physically when he finds him. He didn't give up on him. And the Manda Amar Rabbi Meir says in the Mishnah, Lo Yishta, Savra, he says, you know what? This guy wants to run away and pretend he's free. Let's treat him like he's free. Don't let him drink wine. Make him be a Nazir. Lahavi leitzara. He should be in pain for not being able to take a haircut, not being able to drink wine, right? So that he wants to go back to his previous circumstance of being an Eved, where in truth he is an Eved, and in truth he's not a Nazir. But essentially, we're making a takana saying if you want to pretend to be free, then you have to have all the stringencies of a free person, which is a Nazir, and we think that will convince him that it's time to go back home. So, in fact, he remains an Eved, but according to Rabbi Meir, it's a takana that you treat him like a free man in this regard, that he has to be machmir as a Nazir.
So there's no Yeush thing here?
So, I mean, obviously it depends on the circumstance, but here it's talking about a case where he was not giving up, right? Okay, that's where we'll stop. A few more dapim. I don't know when we're making a scene, but it sounds like Erev Pesach should be a good target. But I
I
don't
know
think
that at RJC they're doing it for the
Sibuk
yeah.
So let's see. I don't know if David is around because he might want to do it at HAR because they probably need someone. But we'll talk to him. So, but anyways, a few days we'll finish, and God willing, next Shabbat when we join together, we will be in Masechet Sota. So very exciting. Have a great weekend.
Very exciting. Shavuot Tov.
Shavuot Tov.